line that I've seen. I'm not as old as you, but I've been watching this program for a couple decades, and worst defensive line I've ever seen. You have a converted linebacker at defensive end. You have defensive tackles that are either true freshmen or under-talented upperclassmen, and it really is just kind of a mess, and it all starts there.
Danny, I think we knew all along, since early in the season this was a bad defense, but the offense had shown the ability to overcome some of those deficiencies that the defense had. You look at the two games they've lost, two big-time games where they've gone, across to play a rival from a different conference on a big stage, and you've seen multiple errors this week, tons of drop passes, just mistakes across the board that they really haven't been making as much, or at least weren't as visible in some of the games against ACC opponents. Why do you think, Miami's program was built on playmakers and guys in those big stages stepping up and making those plays? Why has that attitude not been able to carry over to some of these guys on this roster currently?
Well, I think the offense does have playmakers. I think it is a good offense. Now, as far as the two games you're mentioning, you're exactly right. Missed opportunities, drop passes. That was really the same story in Kansas State and Notre Dame. But the guys that are dropping passes, Duke Johnson in the Kansas State game dropped a couple critical passes. And dropped a critical pass in this Notre Dame game. Philip Dorsett. These are 19-year-olds, 20-year-olds, true freshmen, true sophomore. They're just young players. They're not used to this kind of environment. I think eventually they will be making those kind of plays. And really, they didn't have many opportunities to make plays because the offense did not have the ball. Notre Dame rushed for almost 400 yards in this game, had about 36 first downs. Unbelievable numbers. And Kansas State was a very similar story. So, they didn't have that many opportunities, and the opportunities they did have, they missed. But as far as the offense goes, that's the least of our concerns at the moment. I think eventually with more time, more experience on that big stage, they will be fine. But the defense, that's a different issue.
And, Danny, you got to play the games. North Carolina comes, the Tar Heels come into Miami this weekend. Larry Fedora, new coach there, has got them, looking pretty darn well. But this time last year almost, they went up to Chapel Hill and beat North Carolina, and covered the spread and all that good stuff, and everybody was happy. A lot has changed since then. Obviously, that's what we're talking about. But how do you see this team fitting with North Carolina coming in this Saturday?
Well, that might have been Miami's most complete game last year, was that North Carolina game. They came out sharp, got up to an early lead, and really played very well. Now this year, North Carolina's coming in hot, just put up about 45 against Virginia Tech. They're actually, I think, an 8-point favorite last I checked. Giovanni Bernard, the running back from down here in Fort Lauderdale, tearing it up, ran for about 250 yards against Virginia Tech. So they're coming in hot. It's going to be a critical game. As hopeless as everything looks against Notre Dame, Miami's still 3-0 in the ACC with an opportunity to really put a stranglehold on that Coastal Division, as crazy as it sounds, with the win on Saturday. So this is going to tell us a lot about their ability to bounce back. They bounced back well from the Kansas State game, going on to win at Georgia Tech and then against NC State. So, this is going to be a very important game. There was a team meeting earlier in the week. We always hear about these team meetings. No one really knows what goes on. But the vibe is positive, and they realize that their opportunity in the ACC has not been affected by the losses to Kansas State and Notre Dame. So this is going to be a critical game, and it's really shaping up to be a shootout.
Danny Money, CanesInsight.com, our guest on the Sports Fix, talking Miami Hurricane football. Mark D'Onofrio coming under fire from fans and message boards and whatnot. Al Golden quick to defend him. Is Al Golden's loyalty to his assistant coaches, is that a strong suit in him, or 5 years down the line could that be a detriment to Coach Golden?
Well, remember, Coach D'Onofrio is not just an assistant coach. He's also a good friend and a teammate of Al Golden from Penn State. So that relationship runs very deep. Coach was quick to say that D'Onofrio's had 2 top 20 scoring defenses the past 2 years. But at the same time, when you're 118th in the nation in defense, he owns that. That is what it is. But, when it comes to D'Onofrio, obviously he's under a lot of fire from the fans. I go back to the rant I had earlier. We've had 5 defensive coordinators since 2006 here at the University of Miami. All of them oversaw some pretty poor defenses, and those defenses were keyed by really bad defensive line play. And until that gets fixed, I don't care if you're, if you're anybody. It doesn't matter if you're Algro, it doesn't matter who you are. this defense is not going to get going until that defensive line really starts playing up to the standard of a Miami, Florida, Florida State. And we know a great Florida defensive line. We don't have one of those yet. So that's really what's keeping them back. And I don't see Coach D'Onofrio getting out of that. And Coach Golden is going to ride with him until he feels that he's the problem. And I don't think it's gotten to that point yet.
You've mentioned several times the weakness on that defense being specifically the defensive line. They did get defensive tackle Curtis Porter back to practice this week. But this is a guy that missed a ton of games last year and obviously had that appendectomy in August that's kept him out to this point in time. Who knows when he's going to be able to be full speed and play again. But do we have any idea what Curtis Porter's all about and if he can be a contribution or be a contributor to this defense at some point in time this year?
He's kind of like an urban legend with Miami fans at this point because he's been on the field really only like 6 games his entire career. But when he's been on the field, he looks good. He looks explosive. He looks strong. Looks really exactly what we need at that defensive tackle spot. But he's been injured. He had an infection that held him back for most of last year. This year was an appendectomy. He's had other injuries. So really, he's kind of been built up by Miami fans just waiting for that great defensive tackle to come along. He's in no shape to contribute in the next couple of games. He's probably a while down the road, and who knows how long he will be available when he does come back. But he certainly would help. But I think it's gotten to the point where he's been built up by Miami fans just yearning for a great defensive tackle. It's kind of like, he's like a Bigfoot at this point. So we'll see what he brings. But he's not going to solve the problem by himself, that's for sure.
Danny, a year or so ago when Tony Chickillo was kind of verbally committed to Florida, he ends up going to Miami. I knew he would. His daddy, I played with his daddy. He's a great Miami player. His grandfather, 3rd generation, all that good stuff. But just a question to you. If he would have made that choice to go to Florida, do you see him being the same type of player or a guy that could that would probably be sitting in Florida?
Well, I mean, Florida has just an unbelievable defensive line. I don't think he's fit. He's too good of a player. He endears himself to the coaching staff with his hustle, the way he prepares. So he definitely would have a role, and I think he'd actually be more effective just because he'd be able to rotate in.
Yes.
He's playing so many snaps since he got here. He's basically been playing the entire game since his true freshman year. He's not rotating out at all. He looked a little worn down against Notre Dame. Didn't play as well as he did the past 3 weeks. Some people think he might be playing through injuries, probably because he has to. And the truth is, if he were to sit, this defensive line would go from, one of the worst Miami history to indisputably the worst Miami history. So if he was at a school like Florida, maybe he could nurse an injury like that and then come back strong. So I think he would be effective at Florida. He's a solid player, and really, we're asking him to do too much here.
Good point. Danny Money, CanesInsight.com, the best in the business covering Miami Hurricane football. 10 seconds, man. Yes or no question. If Miami knocks off all of their unranked opponents on their schedule, they can finish the year at 9-3. Is that a real life possibility?
It is, but every game is going to be a shootout. The 2 games they've won have been nail-biters, so they're going to lose one of those down the road.
All right, Danny Money, CanesInsight.com. Check out the website. I look at it every single day, at least maybe 100 times a day, as a matter of fact. Some great stuff on there. Danny, as always, appreciate your time, my friend.
Take care.
Appreciate it. Danny Money, CanesInsight.com, covers the Miami Hurricanes.
That last week, they go to Duke. You better be careful.
I'm going to get you a Duke football T-shirt or something. Coming up next, we turn our attention to maybe even a much sadder place right now in the college football universe, Tallahassee, Florida. Ira Schofield of the Tallahassee Democrat will join us next. We'll talk about the Florida State Seminoles and can they bounce back from that tough loss on the road to NC State. We'll do that next. You're listening to the Sports Fix on ESPN Radio. Find us online at ESPNGo1.com.
The Ocala Poker and Highlight have all